Hi everyone, today I thought we'd go over how I paint my Space Wolves. So this is for Warhammer 40k, but I've definitely leaned into the Horus Heresy style of painting my wolves. Now I'm not a big fan of the baby blue. It can look really good, but I prefer a much more grounded and serious approach to painting my Space Wolves. So we're going to go through the Armour recipe today. I'll show you how I do the verdigris and gold elements as well, but it's a fairly simple scheme to execute. Again, we're not going to be doing any edge highlighting, but we are going to be doing a little bit of chipping and weathering to the model as well, just to bring out some extra details. And all I've done in preparation for today is I've got my miniature here. I have primed him black, and I've just drilled out a couple of little bullet holes throughout the model, just using one of these little pin vices here, and I've also given him a Horus Heresy marine backpack and shoulder pad. So yeah, I hope you enjoy, and let's paint. Now for our base coat, we're going to be using a Tamiya colour acrylic, and it's dark grey. Now, just a word of warning about Tamiya paints: you do need to use an acrylic thinner by Tamiya for these paints as well. So they won't just work with any old filler, they turn to sludge, and I learned the hard way. So all I'm doing is applying a base coat of this colour all over the model, and this is going to be the foundation of which we are going to progressively build our highlights off of. But make sure you get this all in the shadows. It's going to be our main shadow colour. Turn off that compressor there and just work your way around the model, making sure that you hit all the recesses. And once that's done, we can move on to our mid-tone, which is going to be AK's warm grey. So we've built up that dark grey base coat. It's a lovely deep grey colour. The next stage, as I said, we're going to be applying warm grey. So we're just going to imagine that it's a bit of a zenithal, so the sunlight coming from the top and to the side, and we're going to just slowly build up this warm grey on anywhere where we want to create a bit of interest. Now it's important we don't overdo the step, so we want to keep it quite light, because we want plenty of that dark grey in the shadows. So I'm just going to work my way around this model, picking out little areas, keeping the majority of the model with this dark grey, and just hitting where I want to draw the eye and establish a bit more of a brighter shade of the grey. Now this warm grey is, as you can expect, a warm grey, so just put some warmth through the model. We are going to knock it back with our final highlight stage, and the oils are going to knock it back further. So don't worry if it looks a little bit bright at the moment. The oils are going to do the heavy lifting there and knock back this grey to that really kind of deep browny red wolf grey that I've used for the rest of my force. So I'm just going to work my way around the model, get this stage completed, and then we'll move on to the final highlight. Okay, so with that warm grey applied, we've still got plenty of that dark grey in the shadows, and now we're going to come in with our final highlight, which is Sky Grey from Tamiya. So once again, I've moved back to the X20A thinner from Tamiya. Mix this in my airbrush, fairly dilute, but we're going to be aiming within that highlight stage from the warm grey. So we don't want to completely eradicate the warm grey layer that we've put there, but we're going to just airbrush inside of those highlights, but ever so slightly. We don't want this being too bright, but we just want to give it a pop of vibrancy to those key areas. So again, I'm just going to start with the shoulder pad as an example, just within that. Same for the front of the mask, the shoulder, chest, around the power claw, top of the knees, and the hand holding the bolter, just to bring a bit of attention to that too. And also down the backpack and back to the legs. So again, a very subtle stage here. We don't want to overpower that warm grey that we've put in so far. You can afford to make the contrast quite dramatic in some of the areas because the oil is going to tie everything together, as you'll see in the later step. Okay, and just because that's important to show mistakes as well, I think I've gone slightly too heavy with some of the highlighted areas. So all I'm doing is coming back in with some thinned down dark grey again, and I'm just going to redefine the shadow areas. So for example, bottom of the shoulder pads there, underneath his chest, inside of his legs, underneath the power fist, and just reintroduce a little bit of that original grey and just tighten up those highlights. So it's okay to realise these kind of mistakes. We want to catch them now before we get a little bit further, but just referencing them to a model that I've already done, I can see that the grey needs to be a little bit darker than this. So again, take your time. And that's already looking a lot better now. Okay, now all I've done here is I've gloss varnished the whole model and I've applied a couple of decals. Now for anybody curious about where these Space Wolves decals come from, it's from the Horus Heresy decal sheet, and it is a fantastic sheet. If anyone is keen to pick one of these up, I highly recommend it, and it comes with plenty of decals for your minis, so you get some good mileage out of those. The decals have been sealed with gloss varnish. If you are looking for a tutorial on how to apply decals, there are plenty on YouTube. I always just find it's important to just take a bit of wet paper towel, apply a bit of pressure just over the decal to make sure it's nice and flat, and then to give it a good coat of gloss varnish afterwards to get rid of any kind of mismatch in elevation between where the decal is sitting and the actual part that you've applied it to. Next stage is I've just put a little bit of Rhinox hide on my dry brush palette, or as a piece of cork, which I like to use, and I've got a little bit of sponge here. Okay, I've just torn off into a nice kind of point. Now all we're going to be doing here, and this is the fun part, is taking a little bit of Rhinox hide, and we're going to just make sure we get the majority of that off the sponge. We don't want to apply any blobs, and we're going to slowly just tippy tap around the model in any areas where we feel there would be sufficient weathering, such as the joints of armor plates, around the power fist there, around the feet especially, and the backs of the legs. So just take your time, work your way around the model. For those places that we can't reach with the sponge, we're going to come back in afterwards and just establish a bit more definition chipping with the brush. So don't worry too much about those hard to reach places. We're going to come back in and we're going to take care of those next. So work your way around the model, as I said, anywhere you feel there would be the majority of the weathering. Now, also don't worry too much if you go in heavy in some areas like I did there on the foot, because once we apply the oil stage, it's going to hide all evils. So don't be too hard on yourself, just enjoy this stage. As someone that likes to paint quite clean, I find this quite therapeutic. So take your time, work your way around the model, and we'll come back and just establish those hard to reach areas in a moment. Okay, and once that chipping stage is complete, you should have something that looks a bit like this. So as you can see, there are some hard to reach places like inside the legs, underneath the power claw, in and around the face, and on the inside of the pauldrons here. So all I'm going to be doing is taking my brush and literally just establishing some extra definition anywhere where I feel it hasn't had enough from the chipping. For example, underneath the pads on the knees here is a perfect example where I think it just needs an extra little bit of definition. I imagine that these parts are moving around, and these guys might have seen hundreds of years worth of battle, so they are going to be pretty messed up. So especially on the inside of the power fist there, paying special attention to the insides of the fingers, for example, and the tips of the fingers too. Also got these little bullet holes that I've drilled in, just as a bit of extra battle damage. So I'm just going to establish those with some of this Rhinox hide as well. And once you've established all that chipping all the way around, you'll have a Space Wolf that looks like this, and he's already looking like he has seen many fights, and I love the character that this is now starting to build. Now the fun step here, which as I said is going to hide any big blotches of chipping that we may have applied a little bit too liberally, but it's going to start establishing all that definition on the model, and we're using burnt umber from Windsor and Newton. So we've got this gloss varnish already on the model, so I'm just going to be taking a little bit on my brush and just literally tapping it to the areas in which I want to add a little bit more definition and contrast. So this will flow into the recesses. So if we do the pauldron on the arm here, you can see it just flows lovely into the recesses thanks to that capillary action and the gloss varnish. So take your time, move through the model, and make sure you get a good coverage in all the recesses all the way around. Now if you do have some spaces, flat spaces where the oil doesn't reach, just go over it with a dry brush, because it's going to have a little bit of that oil still on the end, and just wipe it over so that you get rid of any of those tire marks that start to form, because once we apply the final matte varnish you will be able to see those. Again, I'm just going around all the little rivets here and just building up some definition and a little bit of dirt and grime on the model as well. Okay, and with that stage done, the armour is complete. So I've allowed the oils to dry for about an hour. They're completely dry now. They'd only reactivate if we were going to apply more mineral spirits. So at this stage you can go around and just clean up a little few areas, like I cleaned up the front of the mask there, the top of the shoulder pad, a bit in between these rivets, and a little bit on the power fist too. But you can see we've got this lovely build up of this reddy brown in all the recesses and around the rivets and things. It just, I think it looks fantastic. Next step is going to be just to black out the guns. I'm going to black out the ribbing between the armor panels. Any black will do fine, but I'm just using Army Painter Matte Black from the Fanatic range. And that's only because I've run out of my Vallejo black, which is the king of all blacks in my opinion. I think that colour is fantastic. And then for the gold elements on the chest, I'm going to be using Victorian brass from Scale Colour, which is a beautifully rich gold colour. Okay, so in preparation for the gold, I have blacked out the rivets and also the shoulder pauldron as well. I've gone around and done all the ribbing and just the bolter casing too. Now I've just mixed in a little bit of warm grey with my black and just done one line across the top of the bolter, but also along the the highest points of the little coils there as well, just to add a bit of difference in the black to where the light will obviously form from sunlight. So I've watered down a little bit of this Victorian brass just on my wet palette. It has very good coverage, this gold paint, and we're just going to block in the gold areas like so. Now obviously this is quite a big colour shift to the overall palette of the rest of the miniature, so just take your time with this. If you do find that you go over slightly, you need to come back in and cover up any mistakes, and just take a little bit of the dark grey on your wet palette and clean those up. But once we matte varnish the model, any mistakes you've made will kind of blend in anyway. And also because we've got all that weathering going on the model, it's going to kind of mask any mistakes. But this is a beautiful gold colour, and I strongly recommend picking some of this up. So I'm just going to go around and do the rivets here as well. What I do find with the rivets is if you have it slightly more on the brush, so load your brush quite significantly, and you can almost just tap the edge of the brush to the rivets and you'll get a perfect little circle of the gold paint on there, and one and done. You don't need to come back and reapply. So I'm just going to finish off this shoulder pad and the other one too. Okay, and once that gold is applied, we are almost done. So just going to bring back in the burnt umber mix from the previous step. I'm just going to thin this down on my brush here, and I'm just going to tap this back into the gold just to put in some definition, but also knock the gold back slightly. And I'm also going to reapply in the recesses and just over the gold for the shoulder pad as well. If you do feel like you need a little bit more definition around the rivets, then obviously you can just go back in and touch those to build up a little bit more dirt and grime, but I think they are looking pretty good as they are at the moment. So I'm just going to let that oil dry. Feel free to use a hairdryer at this stage. It shouldn't make too much of a difference. Just don't blast it nice and close, because you'll blow the oil off where you actually wanted to build that definition of. But I'm just going to give this a quick hit with a blow dryer, and then we'll come back in and do the verdigris. Okay, and we are almost there. So next color I'm going to use is this beautiful oil paint from AK. It's Turquoise Lights. You're going to hear about this a lot from me, because this is my go-to for verdigris at the moment. It just gives this fantastic color, turquoise here, and I think it looks amazing. So all I'm going to do here is take a little bit on this brush, and where I want to apply a little bit of build up of verdigris, I'm just going to tap it very lightly to the model. Now, it is possible to overdo this stage, and we don't want it flooding everywhere and ruining what we've already achieved here. So just a few spots is absolutely fine. I'm going to do a little bit like there's been some build up of rust inside this bullet hole on his chest. I might add a little bit to the bullet hole on his shoulder there too, but also in and around the shoulder pad. And again, we're just adding ever so slightly the verdigris into these recesses, like that brassy gold has started to oxidize over after years of battle damage and use. I'm going to apply to a select couple of rivets. I'm not going to do all of them, because again, I think you can overdo the step, and you can see that this one's kind of run down to the next rivet. I don't mind that. I think it looks cool. So I'm going to just leave that as is, and this one at the bottom I've just put on a little bit thicker to allow the same effect. And I'm actually going to just allow that one to leak down, and I love the effect that this gives. Okay, and that's that done. Now I'm going to come back in with a clean brush, and just where I think there's maybe a little bit too much, I'm just going to wick away some of the excess, like so. Again, we want this to be quite subtle, so we don't want it absolutely everywhere, but I think that looks great. And once you've done that stage, again, just let the oil dry, and I'm going to apply a matte varnish ready for the final steps, but the power armor is almost complete. Okay, and here is the finished miniature. So I've just given this a once over with an ultra matte varnish, and then I've gone back in with Victorian brass and just re-established some of those gold elements where they've been dulled down a little bit too much. Now I've done the glowing eyes off camera, as well as a little OSL on the wrist there. There is a separate video on my YouTube should you want to know how this result is achieved, but I think this guy looks fantastic. I know this tutorial was requested by many people through my Instagram account over the last year, so sorry to keep you waiting, but I do hope you've learned something today. This was a lot of fun to paint up, and he's going to be sitting very proud with the rest of my Space Wolves army when I eventually pop him on the base. Now, these guys obviously have already had their bases completed, and I've loved to add a bit of snow effect to the shoulders and backpacks as well, just to give them the impression that they've been marching through mountainous tundra looking for their prey or stalking their prey. And I love painting more Horus Heresy style on these guys. I just can't do the Viking theme with the baby blue, it's just not for me. But please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you so much for your support so far on this channel. I do hope to be posting 1 or 2 videos a week, but your feedback has been fantastic. So if you do like what you're seeing here, then please drop a subscribe. It really does help, pumps the tires up and makes me excited to put more of this content out if people are finding it helpful. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Take care.